evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Happy Thursday. Nobody seems to remember this, but it was just a few months ago that Joe Biden gave the so-called intel community a vital new mission. They had, he said, until the end of August to find out where the coronavirus came from. Did it emerge from a pangolin in a wet market? Or did the Chinese military create the virus in a bioweapons lab in Wuhan? Joe Biden assured us he was going to get to the bottom of that. He had the canniest sleuths in the world working on that mystery. They'll figure it out, he said. You can trust them. So here we are at the end of August. And what's the answer? Where did COVID come from? So far, no one has told us, and we're starting to suspect that nobody ever will. It's not like the media are planning to push that issue. Vladimir Putin's not from China. They don't care. The coronavirus investigation? What coronavirus investigation? Like Joe Biden himself, they have no memory of anything that happened 3 months ago. And come to think of it, maybe that was the whole point of the exercise. You announce a fake inquiry into something you have absolutely no interest in learning more about, and then you bet on the fact that everyone will forget that inquiry exists. It's pretty tricky. Maybe that's the real purpose of the intel agencies, actually. Not to gather intelligence, but to provide political cover to the politicians who control them. Oh, that's a good question, Wolf. I'll have the CIA look into it and get back to you. Right. Just stay on the line. This call may be monitored for quality assurance. It sounds cynical, we know, but it is striking when you think about it just how often politicians invoke the intel community when they're lying to you. Here was Joe Biden just last month.
Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
Can you please clarify what they have told you about whether that will happen or not?
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion.
So the intel agencies never said the Taliban would sweep into Kabul. That's what Joe Biden claimed. Do you believe him? You probably don't. The intel world may be partisan and deceitful, it certainly is, but we're betting they're not completely stupid. Obviously, they knew the Afghan government could collapse. They must have told Joe Biden that, or at least the people around Joe Biden. Can we prove that they told him? No, we can't prove it. And that's the beauty of using the intel agencies for cover. You get to make any claim you want to make, and no one can prove you're lying because the truth is highly classified. Maybe you're starting to understand why no one ever defunds the CIA. They're too useful. So that was from July, the clip that we just played. At the time, Biden told us the intel community, quote, did not reach the conclusion that the Afghan government would fall to the Taliban. Well, now it's August, and the Afghan government has indeed fallen to the Taliban. That's not our assessment, as they say in Washington. It actually happened, as you know. The Afghan troops threw down their rifles. The president ran away. There's a black Taliban flag hanging over the Capitol. So how did this all happen? And more to the point, how did our extravagantly funded intelligence agencies not know it was going to happen? Well, actually, they did know, sort of. That's Joe Biden's new position. He explained it yesterday on ABC News. Watch.
Back in July, you said a Taliban takeover was highly unlikely. Was the intelligence wrong, or did you downplay it?
There was no consensus. You go back and look at the intelligence reports. They said that it was more likely to be sometime by the end of the year.
Are you following this? In the space of a single month, the official line went from our intelligence agencies think everything is fine in Afghanistan to there was no consensus in the intelligence agencies that everything was not fine, or something like that. It's not exactly clear what Joe Biden was saying there. All we can be totally certain of is that we will never get to see the documents he was referring to. So really, anything could be true, assuming truth still exists. Pretty smart. Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is not as clever. A smarter man might have couched his lies for plausible deniability down the road, but unfortunately, Mark Milley is not that man. So here's what he claimed this week in public.
There was nothing that I or anyone else saw that indicated a collapse of this army and this government in 11 days.
That was totally unequivocal. According to Mark Milley, there was zero intelligence, quote, nothing that I or anyone else saw suggesting a coming collapse in Afghanistan. So he literally had no idea what was coming because nobody told him. The people paid to keep track were not keeping track. The intel agencies failed completely. And given their budgets and power, that is shocking if you think about it for a minute. Clearly, someone should be fired, if not court-martialed. But no, says Joe Biden, that's not true. In fact, says Joe Biden, looking straight into the face of his old friend, now the anchor at ABC, no one in the entire U.S. government, and certainly not in the White House, could have done anything different or better as we withdrew from Afghanistan. The bad parts you saw on television were inevitable. No mistakes of any kind by anyone connected in any way to Joe Biden occurred. No one can be blamed for anything. No one should feel guilty. Everyone's sleeping just fine. Thank you very much. Watch.
But you don't think this could have been handled, this actually could have been handled better in any way? No mistakes?
No, I don't think it could have been handled in a way that we're going to go back in hindsight and look, but the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how that happened.
So for you, that was always priced into the decision?
Yes.
Really, Mr. President? You couldn't have handled this better in any way? Not even a tiny adjustment? No, says Joe Biden. Meanwhile, desperate people tumble from airplanes thousands of feet in the air. Many thousands of Americans remain trapped tonight in a country now controlled by the Taliban. But no problem, says the president. How do you assess a statement like that? Well, our friend Piers Morgan described it as, quote, breathtakingly arrogant and disturbingly delusional. And that sounds about right, if possibly a little understated. Watching it, you wonder, does Joe Biden understand what this moment means to the country he leads? We had to leave Afghanistan. He was right about that. It was always going to be ugly. That is true. But this ugly? This humiliating? This destructive to America's authority in the world? This damaging to our future? No. None of that was foregone. None of that was necessary. All of that was a choice that Joe Biden and his advisors made intentionally over months. They priced it in, as he just told us. They knew it was going to happen, but they did it anyway. What does that say about them? What does it tell you that they left thousands of American citizens behind when they fled and then seem markedly unconcerned about what might happen to those American citizens in Afghanistan under the Taliban? Well, it tells you an awful lot. The United States government, to restate, exists to serve its own citizens. The U.S. government exists to serve its own citizens, period. The U.S. government has no other purpose. The moment the U.S. government stops serving U.S. citizens is the moment the U.S. government becomes illegitimate. That is true. That has always been true since the day the country was founded, and it is obvious to most people who live here. Does Joe Biden understand it? Sincerely, it's possible that he doesn't. Toward the end of his interview with ABC, there was a telling exchange. That exchange was never broadcast on camera. Now, television networks edit interviews very often for time. But ABC News appears to have chosen to edit out portions that made Joe Biden look, how to put it, not presidential, incoherent, confused. We think it's worth knowing what happened, especially in a moment of national crisis. So we're going to read from the transcript that we were provided. And here it is. George Stephanopoulos. I think of a lot of Americans, even a lot of veterans who served in Afghanistan, agree with you on the big strategic picture. They believe we had to get out. But I wonder how you respond to an Army Special Forces officer, Javier McKay. He did 7 tours. He was shot twice. He agrees with you. He says, we have to cut our losses in Afghanistan. But he adds, I just wish we could have left with honor. Here's Joe Biden's response. Look, that's like asking my deceased son, Bo, who spent 6 months in Kosovo and a year in Iraq as a Navy captain and then major. I mean, as an Army major. And, you know, I'm sure he had regrets coming out of Afghanistan. I mean, out of Iraq. He had regrets to how it's going. But the idea, what's the alternative? End quote. Now, we're waiting for that tape, but that's the transcript. Now, the president's son was in the Navy, not the Army. He was in the Army, not the Navy. It's not clear from that. We believe he was in the Army and not the Navy. He did not serve in Afghanistan. He served in Kosovo and Iraq. Joe Biden can't seem to remember those details. We're not attacking him. We're not telling you this with glee. We're telling you because it's true. This is the man leading our country. Now, the scary thing about what's happening in Afghanistan is not that Afghanistan is collapsing. Afghanistan has always been in various states of collapse, by our standards, for 1,000 years. The scary thing about Afghanistan is that it reveals American weakness, and weakness abets aggression. Power vacuums are always filled. The problem with what we just read you is that it reveals weakness at the very center of the U.S. government, weakness that possibly can't be fixed. And that's the real problem. Over time, it's the real threat.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.